My phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was my granddaughter crying. "Grandma, the man in my room is back again. He's laughing." I ran to her room immediately. I found her alone, but she was pointing at the closet. I opened it. There was nothing there. I sat on the bed to calm her down, and then I heard a noise from under the bed. And when I bent down to look, I froze when I saw. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's reached. The ringing of the phone tore through the dead of night, so sharp it felt like it was ripping the calm apart. I woke with a jolt, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. At 68 years old, sleepless nights don't surprise me anymore, but this feeling was different. Who would be calling at this hour, at 3 in the morning? The bone-chilling cold of the old house in Clearwater, Georgia, seemed to seep into every one of my joints as I stumbled out of my room, my feet trembling on the ice-cold wooden floor. I picked up the receiver, and the weak, shaky voice of Emily, my little granddaughter, echoed in the darkness. "Grandma, the man in my room is back again. He's smiling." I felt my heart stop. A cold fear shot through me from head to toe, making my skin crawl and leaving me too weak to stand. Emily, just 10 years old, was speaking in a tone full of panic, like a cornered little animal. I tried to stay calm, whispering, "Emily, I'm here, don't be scared, honey," even though I was trembling too. I ran up the stairs, each step making the old floorboards creak as if they were screaming along with the anguish that was choking me. The door to Emily's room flew open. The dim yellow light from her lamp cast strange, distorted shadows that seemed to dance in the darkness. The little girl was huddled on her bed, curled up in a corner, her face soaked with tears. Her big eyes, which always sparkled like stars, were now dull with fear. Her trembling little hand was pointing straight at the old oak wardrobe in the corner of the room. Seeing it, I remembered when Emily was just a baby and loved to hide in there to play hide and seek with me, laughing with that clear, bell-like voice that filled the house. Now that same spot had become a terrifying place for her. I walked closer, taking a deep breath, trying to stop my body from shaking. I threw the wardrobe doors open with a bang that echoed through the room. Inside, there were just a few dresses hanging, some dolls with empty stares, and several stacked boxes of toys. No one was there. I let out a sigh of relief, but only for a second, because Emily's voice, broken with terror, spoke again. "I saw him. I saw him go in there when he heard you coming." Her tears fell one after another like little knives in my heart. I wanted to scream at her that no one was there, that it was all in her imagination. But when I looked into her terrified eyes, I knew this was more than just a nightmare. I turned to her, sat on the edge of the bed, and wrapped my arms around her. Her little body was shaking uncontrollably. Her hair was soaked with sweat stuck to her forehead. I gently stroked her head and whispered, "It's okay. It was just a nightmare. I'm here with you. No one can hurt you." I said it quietly, but deep down, I didn't know if I was trying to calm her or myself. That room, which was once filled with her laughter, now seemed to be swallowed by darkness. I held her tighter, trying to pass some warmth from my tired body to hers, hoping to chase away her fear. Just then we heard a noise, a scratching sound, very faint, but in the dead silence of the night, it sounded as sharp as a knife. My skin crawled and I went rigid. I motioned for Emily to be quiet, squeezing her shoulder tightly. I felt my heart sink into my stomach, beating so violently I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I strained to listen. That sound, soft but unmistakable, seemed to be coming from right under the bed. An invisible fear was strangling me. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know, but I had to, for Emily. I leaned down slowly, my knees cracking in pain as they touched the floor. My eyes tried to adjust to the darkness, the dim light from the nightstand lamp falling on the cold tile floor. And then I saw something, a small, shiny object lost in the shadows. My whole body froze. The breath caught in my throat. All I could do was stay perfectly still, staring at that object, not daring to move. In that moment of terror, Memories from years past flooded my mind like a slow-motion movie, dragging me back to the days of pain and hope that had been woven into my life. I clearly remembered that first night when Sarah, my daughter, came running to my house carrying Emily, who was barely 7 years old. It was pouring rain that night. The water running in streams down the dirt road that led to my house. The desperate pounding on the door woke me with a start, and when I opened it, I saw Sarah standing there soaked, her hair plastered to her face, one cheek swollen and purple. Emily was hiding in her mother's arms, her huge eyes filled with fear, her lips pressed tight to hold back tears. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," Sarah sobbed, her voice broken. "Mark!" He hit me again. I hugged them both tightly, feeling my heart break. I brought them inside, lit the fireplace to warm them up, but the cold inside me wouldn't go away. Mark Harris, Sarah's ex-husband, had once been a hard-working construction worker with a wide smile and bright eyes. When Sarah fell in love with him, I thought my daughter had found a good man. But then, with unstable jobs and days without work, Mark started to change. He sought comfort in drinking and gambling, and he took out every loss on his wife. The arguments that were once just words turned into punches and slaps. One time, when I went to visit her, I saw Sarah in the kitchen trying to hide a bruise on her arm and forcing a smile so I wouldn't worry. But I knew. I saw everything. I begged her to leave him, but she would just shake her head. "I don't want Emily to grow up without a father, Mom." Until that night, when she couldn't take it anymore. That day, Mark had come home drunk, shattered the glass coffee table, and hit Sarah in front of Emily. The little girl, so small, screamed and clung to her mother's legs to protect her. That was the last straw. Sarah grabbed her daughter and ran to my house, and this time, she didn't go back. That marriage ended with a crumpled divorce paper, signed in a hurry on my kitchen table, under a weak, yellowish light. I looked at my daughter, barely in her 30s, her face marked by pain, and at Emily, who instead of playing happily like she should, would flinch at any loud noise. The three of us started a new life in the old house in Clearwater. That house where I had lived my whole life became a refuge for 3 generations. I went back to my food cart at the market, selling homemade chili and cornbread every morning. The smell of the spices, the sizzle of the oil in the pan, and the greetings from my neighbors were the only things that kept me going. Sarah got a job as a waitress at a small diner in town. The work was hard, the pay was next to nothing, but she would say, "As long as Emily and I have peace, Mom." We struggled, but every night, when we sat down together to a simple plate of rice and beans and listened to Emily talk about her day at school, I felt a sense of relief in my heart. As long as the little girl was smiling, as long as Sarah didn't have to hide bruises anymore, I was grateful. One day, Sarah met Robert Miller. He appeared like a ray of sunshine in the middle of our gray days. He was an elementary school teacher in the town, tall and thin, with neatly combed black hair and a calm, soothing voice. The first time he came to the house, he brought a bag of fresh oranges from his orchard, and I saw Sarah's eyes light up, a spark I thought had long since gone out. "Mom, he's so nice," Sarah told me, her cheeks flushed as she talked about him. He started coming around often, sometimes to fix the faulty wiring in the kitchen, other times to bring Emily an old book or some candy. I still remember the day he sat at the table, patiently explaining to Emily how to solve a maths problem. His voice soft. "Try breaking it down into small steps. Emily, it's not that hard." The little girl, who was always so shy, smiled for the first time when she got a calculation right. Seeing that, I felt a strange warmth in my heart, as if after so many years of storms, my family was finally finding some peace. The neighbors started to notice. Mrs. Rose, who ran the fruit stand next to mine, would joke, "Carol, your daughter got lucky, finding a teacher that nice. Robert sure is a decent man." The whole town praised him. They said he was a respectable man, a dedicated teacher who always organized free classes for the poor kids. Hearing those comments, I became convinced that Sarah and Emily had found a safe harbor. I started to dream of days where our family would be whole, without fear, and without tears. Robert slowly became a part of the house. He liked to sit on the porch with a cup of coffee I'd serve him and talk about his students, about his dream of building a small library for the town's children. I liked listening to him. I liked the way he always smiled gently when he spoke of the future. "Mom, I want to give Sarah and Emily a good life," he told me one night as we both watched the moon hanging in the clear water sky. I nodded, smiling, thinking that my daughter had finally found a man who valued her. Just a year after they met, Robert asked Sarah to marry him. He got down on one knee in my living room with a simple silver ring in his hand, and with a trembling voice said, "Sarah, I can't promise you the world, but I do promise to spend my life loving you and taking care of you and Emily." Sarah cried, hugged him tightly, and from the corner of the room, I let silent tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness, but of joy. I thought that maybe God had heard my prayers and had given my daughter and granddaughter a good man. The wedding was simple at the old church in town. The whole place was filled with laughter and blessings. Robert's colleagues came in droves, all raising glasses of whiskey to toast the perfect couple. Emily, in her little white dress, scattered flower petals down the aisle, her smile so radiant it was as if she had never known a day of pain. After the wedding, Robert came to live with us. I gave the newlyweds the big bedroom and moved into the small room next to the kitchen. I didn't mind. As long as I could see Sarah laughing and Emily playing peacefully, I was content. The first few days, everything seemed perfect. Robert kept his calm demeanor, always helping around the house, from fixing a leaky pipe to painting the peeling wall in the backyard. He would also sit with Emily, teaching her to draw or telling her stories about heroes from American history. Seeing that little family, I thought that after so many storms, we had finally found peace. However, strange signs began to appear, like ripples on a calm lake. During the day, I noticed a change in Emily. The little girl, who used to be so bright and would sing nursery rhymes while playing in the yard, was now frighteningly quiet. Whenever Robert walked into the living room, Emily would immediately lower her head, clutching the hem of her dress so tightly her knuckles turned white. She would shrink, like a little bird trying to become invisible in front of a hawk. I could clearly see the tension in her every move. But what broke my heart was her expression. Her eyes were no longer the clear eyes of a child, but were filled with shadows, as if hiding a secret too heavy to bear. Once Robert sat on the couch, with that gentle smile I once believed was sincere, and asked, "How was school today, Emily? Does your stepdad need to help you with anything?" His voice sounded kind, but I saw Emily shake her head forcefully, her lips pressed tight, and then run off to the kitchen, hiding behind the wooden door. I just stood there, watching her little back disappear, feeling as if someone was squeezing my heart. I tried to talk to Emily, hoping she would open up to me. One afternoon, while we were both on the porch, I gently took her hand and asked, "Emily, tell me the truth. What are you so scared of? You can tell me anything. I'll protect you." But she just lowered her head, her eyes filling with tears, and mumbled, "I don't know, Grandma. I'm scared." Her voice was so low I had to lean in to hear her, and the way she pressed her lips together with that look of pure dread stopped me from pushing her any further. I just hugged her, stroking her soft hair, while inside me a sense of unease began to grow into a thick cloud, like a storm about to break. One day, I came home from the market earlier than usual. The sun wasn't high yet, and the air was still cool. But as I walked into the house, a strange feeling washed over me. Everything was unusually silent, the only sound being the ticking of the wall clock. I called for Emily, but there was no answer. As I walked down the hallway to her room, I saw Robert standing right in front of Emily's door, one hand on the wall and the other fiddling with the light fixture in the ceiling. He jumped when he saw me, though he quickly recovered with a natural smile. "This light has been flickering, Mom. I thought I'd change the bulb so the little one can study with better light." I nodded, trying to stay calm, but in his eyes, that flash of nervousness that appeared for a split second before he regained his calm expression. I felt a chill. Why was he there when no one else was home? That question started to drill into my mind relentlessly. The next night, I was jolted awake when I felt the sheets move. Emily, in her thin pajamas, had snuck into my bed, trembling like a dry leaf in the wind. I held her, noticing her ragged breathing. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice low as if she was afraid someone would hear. "That man was in my room again tonight, standing in the corner. He was just standing there smiling, watching me the whole time. He even touched me. I'm so scared, Grandma." Her words were like a knife to the chest. I held her tight, forcing myself to speak calmly. "It was probably just a dream, Emily. Tomorrow I'll fix up your room. I'll put some candles in there to make it feel warmer. How does that sound?" But inside, I knew it wasn't a dream. The way she was shaking, the way she clung to me as if I were her only safe place, kept me from fooling myself any longer. I stroked her hair, humming a lullaby I used to sing to her as a baby while my mind raced. Who was this man, and why was Emily so terrified? One night, as I passed by Emily's room, I caught a glimpse of a shadow slipping behind the curtain through the crack of the slightly open door. My heart leapt into my throat. I pushed the door open, but I only found Emily sitting on her bed, hugging her knees, her eyes wide with terror. "Who did you see, Emily?" I asked immediately, my voice trembling. The girl shook her head as tears rolled down her cheeks. "The man. He was laughing again. I checked every corner of the room, pulled back the curtain, opened the window, but there was nothing. Just the shadow of the trees swaying in the wind." I hugged Emily and calmed her down. "It's okay, sweetie. It's just the shadow of a tree." But in the bottom of my heart, I knew something was wrong. That shadow, even for just a moment, made my skin crawl, as if it brought a dark premonition with it. I started making it a habit to wake up early, sit on the porch with a cup of cold coffee, and just watch in silence. Every morning, as soon as the sun came up, I'd sit there, my eyes glued to the front door. I noticed that Robert often got up in the middle of the night. Once, I heard his quiet footsteps in the hallway, then the soft creak of the kitchen door. When I asked him about it, he always had a reasonable excuse. I was thirsty, Mom, or I heard a strange noise in the yard and went to make sure the back door was locked. His voice was calm, but I started noticing little things. One day I saw him standing in the yard, not checking the door, but staring up at Emily's bedroom window. When I got closer, he turned around quickly, pretending to fix the fence. His smile, which had once given me confidence, now felt cold, like a mask that was too perfect. The loose pieces were starting to fit together in my mind. Emily's fear, the times Robert lingered near her room, his late-night excuses. It was all like a terrifying picture slowly coming into focus, but I didn't want to believe it. Robert was a teacher, respected by the whole town. He had helped my family through our toughest times. How could he be the source of Emily's terror? And if he was, what had he done to make her so afraid? And now, as I leaned down under the bed, the dim yellowish light from the lamp barely lit a corner of the cold tile floor. I held my breath, reached my trembling hand into that dark space, and my fingers touched a hard, shiny object. When I pulled it out, I felt my heart stop. Robert's cell phone with its shiny silver case was there, like a silent accusation. I recognized it immediately. It was the phone he always carried with him, either in his jacket pocket or on the dining room table. Why was it here, under Emily's bed, in the middle of the night? That question was like a stab wound that left me breathless. I glanced at Emily, who was still huddled on the bed, her eyes red, her little hands clutching the sheet. I quickly hid the phone in my hand, not wanting her to see it. I was afraid that just the sight of it would make her terror spill over. I stood up, walked around the room, checking everything again as if to reassure myself. The window was still locked, the latch cold under my fingers. The curtain moved slightly with the wind coming through a crack, and I suddenly understood that the scratching sound that had made my skin crawl was just a dry branch hitting the glass. A chilling coincidence, as if the house itself was trying to trick me. I went back to Emily, sat on the edge of the bed, and trying to keep my voice steady, I said, "It's okay, honey. It's just the wind. I'll stay with you tonight, okay?" The girl nodded weakly, cuddling up against me. I held her, feeling every shaky breath her body took. I sang her an old lullaby in a low voice, like when she was little, but my mind was in chaos. The phone in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and every second that passed pulled me deeper into a terrifying doubt. I waited until Emily's breathing became regular and her eyes closed. Only then did I dare to stand up. I left the room, the phone still clutched in my hand, and every step felt like it was made of lead. I had just started down the stairs when I jumped, seeing Robert come out of the living room. He rubbed his eyes, pretending to be sleepy, and in a low but cold voice asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" I heard noises upstairs. My hand, hiding the phone in my robe pocket, was soaked with sweat. I felt as if he could see right through me, as if he knew I had the evidence. I forced a smile, and my voice trembling, I answered, "It's nothing, Robert. Emily must have had a nightmare." I calmed her down and she went back to sleep. He scratched his head and gave a faint smile, but his eyes, the same ones I once thought were sincere, now sent shivers down my spine. "The girl's been having too many nightmares lately," he said in a flat tone, though I sensed a cold edge in his words. "I'll talk to her tomorrow." I nodded, pretending everything was normal, but inside, my heart was raging like a stormy sea. If he was sleeping in his room with Sarah, as he usually did, then why was his phone under Emily's bed? That question burned like fire, incinerating all the trust I ever had in him. I went back to my room, locked the door, and with shaking hands, I took out the phone. The screen was black, probably out of battery. I stood frozen at the edge of the bed, staring at it as if it might speak on its own, as if it would reveal the truth. But it remained silent, guarding its secret. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, my eyes wide open in the darkness, listening to every sound in the house, the ticking of the clock, the wind whistling through the crack in the window, and even quiet footsteps that I might have only imagined. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting faint rays on the floor. Robert's phone, locked away in a drawer, was still there, reminding me that I couldn't put this off any longer. I knew I had to act. I had to protect Emily, even if it meant tearing everything apart. Inside me was a storm, fear, anger, but above all, determination. I was not going to let my granddaughter live in that horror anymore. I gathered all my courage and called Mary, my best friend, a psychologist in the center of town. Her voice was as gentle as always, but I heard the concern when I told her, "Mary, I need your help. Emily, the girl isn't okay. I want you to see her." I didn't tell her the details. I didn't dare mention the phone or the suspicions that were eating me alive. I just said Emily was having nightmares and needed a professional to help her. Mary agreed immediately, asking me to bring her to the office at noon. When I spoke to Sarah, I had to choose every word carefully. I sat across from my daughter in the kitchen, trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. "Sarah, I've noticed Emily has been having a lot of nightmares lately. It's probably from the stress at school. I want to take her to a psychologist so she can sleep better." Sarah, who was pouring coffee, looked up in surprise, but then she nodded. "If you think that's what's best for her, Mom, then do it." "I'm worried about Emily too." I sighed in relief, but just then Robert walked out of the living room, frowning, his tone annoyed. "Why take a kid to a psychologist, Mom? People will talk. Emily just needs to go to bed earlier and stop watching those scary movies." He laughed, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I forced a smile and replied, "I'm just worried about her, Robert. I just want her to be able to sleep peacefully." He shrugged and turned away, but the look he gave me as he passed was so cold, I had to clench my fists under the table to stop them from shaking. At noon, I took Emily by the hand and walked her to Mary's clinic. The little girl walked slowly, her small, cold hand in mine. I tried to tell her funny stories, to remind her of the days we used to pick oranges in the backyard, but Emily just kept her head down, not answering. Seeing her like that felt like my heart was being squeezed. The girl who used to talk non-stop now seemed like a shadow. Mary's office was cozy, with pastel-colored paintings on the walls and a soft scent of lavender in the air. She put on some quiet instrumental music and offered Emily a cup of hot cocoa. Smiling, "Emily, have some cocoa, it smells delicious." The girl took the cup but just held it in her hands, her eyes fixed on the floor, clinging to me as if she was afraid I would leave. Mary didn't rush her. She sat across from Emily and spoke in a soft voice, like running water. "Emily, do you want to tell me about your dreams? I'm here to help you. No one is going to blame you." Emily didn't answer, just squeezed my hand tighter. I rubbed her back and whispered, "It's okay, sweetie. Grandma's right here." But inside I was scared. Scared she wouldn't talk. Scared I had made a mistake by bringing her. Scared I wasn't strong enough to face the truth. Mary patiently took out some crayons and white paper and placed them in front of Emily. "If you don't want to talk, would you like to draw? You can draw what you're afraid of or whatever you want me to know." I saw Emily's small hand tremble as she picked up a black crayon. She started to draw, line by line, as if each stroke was pulling out a piece of her pain. On the paper, a dark room appeared with a small bed, and in the corner, a tall shadow with no face, just a twisted smile. Emily's tears fell and smudged the drawing, each drop like a drizzle blurring the lines. Mary looked at the drawing and asked gently, "Emily, who is this man? Did he say anything to you?" The girl nodded, her voice tiny, barely audible. "He told me that if I told Grandma, she would die." Those words were like a knife plunging into my chest. The glass of water I was holding slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. My whole body went numb as if my blood had stopped flowing. I wanted to scream, to ask Emily why she hadn't spoken up sooner. But seeing her pale little face, I understood that she had been carrying this fear alone for far too long. Mary looked at me with eyes that were a mix of compassion and resolve. She kept talking to Emily, her voice still soft, but now filled with determination. "Emily, you are so brave for drawing this. Do you want to tell me more? Your grandma and I are going to protect you." The girl hesitated, looking from me to Mary, as if fighting an internal battle. I took her hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "I'm here, Emily, you can talk. I won't let anyone hurt you." Finally, after more than an hour with Mary's patience, Emily broke down into heartbreaking sobs and clung to me. Her voice burst out, as if all the fear she had held in for so long came rushing out. "It's my stepdad. He comes into my room every night. He just stands there smiling and he touches me. I'm so scared, Grandma." Emily's words were like an earthquake that shattered everything inside me. I froze, holding her little body, feeling every one of her tremors. In my mind, it was like 100 needles piercing me, a sharp, agonizing pain. I wanted to scream, to curse Robert, to run and confront him that very second, but I knew I had to stay calm for Emily. I swallowed my tears, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "I'm here, my love. I will never let him hurt you again." But inside, I was boiling with rage. Robert, the man I had trusted, the man I had considered our family's savior, turned out to be a demon in disguise. Mary took my hand, her gaze firm. "Carol, we have to call the police. Right now. This can't go on." I nodded, my heart racing, trembling with fear, but also burning with fury. That afternoon, I walked Emily to the police station. She held on to me tightly, her eyes red but no longer crying, as if she had used up all her tears in therapy. I stroked her hair and whispered, "I'm here, sweetie. Everything is going to be okay." Though deep down I wasn't so sure. How could I go up against the whole town, where Robert was seen as a hero, a respected teacher? The police station was at the end of Main Street, an old building with white walls that had turned yellow with age. As I pushed the door open, the smell of old paper and stale tobacco hit me. A middle-aged, pot-bellied police officer with a wrinkled uniform greeted us. He was sitting behind a desk and looked at us with tired eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, and began to tell him everything: Emily's nightmares, the phone I found under her bed, and finally, the girl's heartbreaking confession in the therapy session. I placed Emily's drawing on the desk and pointed to the dark, distorted figure. This is what my granddaughter has been seeing. She's not making it up. I need you to investigate this immediately. The officer, whose name tag read Evans, listened to me while yawning, as if what I was saying was just another trivial complaint. He raised an eyebrow and said condescendingly, "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Carroll? Kids have wild imaginations. Maybe she saw a scary movie and then had a dream or made it all up." His words were like a slap in the face. I felt the blood rush to my head, my anger exploding. I slammed my hand on the desk, making the papers jump. My granddaughter is not making anything up. I found Robert's phone under her bed myself. He had no reason to be in there in the middle of the night. Evans let out a dry laugh, a smirk full of contempt that made me want to scream. "Maybe he just forgot it there," he said in a monotone voice. "It's normal for a stepdad and a stepkid not to get along, ma'am. You shouldn't be so quick to blame someone, especially a man like Professor Miller. The whole town loves him." I was so furious my body was shaking, my hands clenched into fists. Emily next to me grabbed the sleeve of my blouse, her small body trembling. I felt my granddaughter's fear, and that hurt me even more. "This is a formal complaint," I said, my voice firm. "I demand that you file a report right now." Evans sighed, picked up his pen reluctantly, scribbled a few lines on the paper in front of him, and closed the file. "All right, we'll look into it," he said, but his tone made it clear he wasn't taking it seriously. "But let me tell you something. Don't cause any more trouble. Your daughter's husband is a respected teacher. Don't make a scene over nothing and ruin a man's reputation." His words were like a bucket of cold water. I just stood there, feeling the small spark of hope I had flicker and die. I wanted to scream, to force him to act. But seeing Evans's indifferent gaze, I knew I was up against an invisible wall. Leaving the station, I felt like the whole world had turned its back on me. Emily held my hand, walking in silence, her eyes on the ground. I was about to cross the street when something turned my stomach. Robert, in a spotless white shirt, was standing in the police station's parking lot, his arm around Officer Evans's shoulders, talking like old friends. He patted him on the back and they both laughed loudly. I froze, my feet rooted to the spot. He already knew. He knew I had come, that I had reported him. I quickly pulled Emily away, trying to block her view. But Robert's triumphant look, that quick flash in his eyes as he turned toward me, was burned into my mind. It was like a cold warning. You can't touch me. That night when we got home, the air felt heavier than ever. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, the smell of pot roast filling the house. She looked up as we came in and asked with concern, "Mom, where did you take Emily all day?" "I called and you didn't answer," I stammered, looking for an excuse so she wouldn't suspect. "I took her to the doctor. She was feeling a little sick." But before I could add anything else, Robert appeared from the living room, a twisted smile on his face and his voice sickly sweet. But sharp. My mother-in-law is so dramatic, isn't she? The girl keeps making things up and ends up embarrassing the family. He stared at me, his gaze seeming to pierce right through me, as if daring me to tell the truth. I clenched my fists and lowered my head to hide the rage burning inside me. I wanted to scream everything at Sarah, tell her about the phone, about what Emily had confessed. But when I saw the trusting look in my daughter's eyes as she turned to Robert, I knew it would be useless. She smiled at him, put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Emily is just being difficult. I'll talk to her." Her words were like a knife twisting in my heart. I knew in that moment that the door to justice had been slammed shut in our faces. A few days later, Robert began his performance. He played the part of a father, a husband wrongly accused, perfectly. That night, as the dim light from an old chandelier spilled into the living room, Robert gathered the whole family. He stood in the middle of the room with a feigned calmness, but his voice was loaded with drama, like an actor on a stage. "I can't believe my wife's daughter hates me so much that she would invent such a disgusting story to ruin my reputation." He emphasized every word, his eyes glistening as if he were holding back tears. I was there, holding Emily, feeling the blood boil in my veins. He was talking about my granddaughter, about the pain she had endured, as if it were just a childish fantasy. I wanted to scream, to run at him and expose him, but the look on Sarah's face, my daughter's face, stopped me. Sarah looked at me with reproach, as if I were the one to blame for dragging the family into this nightmare. Then she turned to Emily, her voice shaking with rage. "Emily, how could you make up something so disgusting about your stepfather? He has loved you and cared for you like his own daughter." Her words were like a knife plunging into my chest. Emily burst into tears, hiding behind me, clinging to my clothes with her small hand, as if afraid she would be torn away from me. I held her tight, feeling every shudder of her little body, and screamed at my daughter, my voice broken with anger and pain. "The girl is not lying, Sarah. You have to listen to her. You have to believe her." But Robert, like a venomous snake, quickly stepped forward, placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, and spoke with calculated sweetness. "You have to believe me, Sarah. I'm a teacher. Generations of students love me. I have done everything to love and care for Emily. I would never do something so dirty." He stressed the word dirty, as if trying to drill into Sarah's mind that what Emily was saying was impossible. She burst into tears, hugged him tightly, and murmured, "I believe you, Robert. I can't accept that my own daughter is capable of saying such cruel things." Her words were another direct stab to my heart. I stood there motionless, feeling my own daughter turn her back on me and on Emily. Robert looked at me, and for a split second, I saw a flash of triumph in his eyes. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, before he put on a look of false indignation and suffering again. "Mom, if you and the girl continue to slander me, I'll have no choice but to contact a lawyer to defend my honor. I don't want this family to be destroyed, but I can't allow you to defame me like this." He said it calmly, but every word was a chilling threat. I hugged Emily tighter, trying to contain the fury that was consuming me. He knew I had gone to the police station, that I was trying to expose him. The image of him chatting and laughing with Officer Evans in the station's parking lot came back to me, a cruel piece of the puzzle. It was Evans who had told him everything, and now Robert was fighting back, turning Emily and me into liars. Sarah unleashed her anger on Emily. Standing by the table, hands on her hips, she yelled, "From now on, you are forbidden to speak ill of your stepfather, Emily. If you do it again, I'll send you to live with your real father." Her voice was sharp, as if she no longer recognized her own daughter. Emily buried her face on the table, sobbing, her hiccups breaking my heart. I held her to my chest, feeling her body tremble, and looked Sarah straight in the eye, my tone firm and hard. "If you ever talk to her like that again, I'll be the one to take Emily out of this house." My words echoed in the silence, like a declaration of war. Sarah froze, a hurt look flashing in her eyes for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by rage. "Mom, how could you do this to me?" she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. Robert stood with his arms crossed in the corner of the room, not saying a word, but his gaze was as cold as ice, watching my granddaughter and me as if we were intruders in our own home. He didn't need to speak. His silence was enough to assert his power. I squeezed Emily's hand tightly and led her to her room, trying to contain the rage and pain that were burning inside me. I stayed with her that night, listening to the little girl's shaky breaths, and I knew I couldn't let things go on like this. I had failed to protect Emily from Mark, her own father, and now I couldn't let Robert continue to terrorize my granddaughter. A few days later, I decided to act. I couldn't let Emily live for one more minute in that house, where every corner hid an invisible threat. In silence, I packed a few of my and Emily's clothes into an old cloth bag, folding each shirt carefully, as if I were packing up my entire life. I did it without making a sound, while the whole house slept. Every little noise, from the zipping of the bag to the creak of the floorboards, made my heart clench with fear, terrified that Robert would wake up and find us. One morning before the sun was up, I took Emily by the hand, and we quietly left the house where I had lived my entire life. The heavy wooden door closed behind us, and it felt as if a piece of my heart had been torn away. That house, where Sarah's laughter once echoed when she was a child, where my husband and I had raised our children, was now nothing more than a cage filled with darkness. Emily squeezed my hand tightly, not saying a word, but her eyes asked me, "Grandma, where are we going?" I smiled at her, trying to hide my pain. "I'm going to find a safe place for you, Emily. As long as you have me, you won't have to be afraid." We rented a small, damp room near the town church. The room had only a single bed, an old wooden table, and a small window that looked out onto the dirt street. The musty smell from the walls and the church bells ringing every hour were all we had. But I didn't care. As long as Emily was safe, I was willing to give up everything. I went back to selling chili at the market, under the scorching sun or the cold rain, every morning. Emily was enrolled in a new school where no one knew our story. But a small town doesn't forgive those who disrupt its false sense of peace. The neighbors started to whisper, to shoot us looks of distrust and contempt. "That Carol is getting old and still looking for trouble," they'd whisper behind my back. "She just wants to tarnish Professor Miller's name, to ruin her daughter's life. What a shame." I tried to ignore the gossip, but every word was like a knife twisting in my side. I had lived my whole life in Clearwater, raised my children there, shared my food with neighbors in hard times, and yet now Emily and I were seen as outsiders, as troublemakers. But what hurt the most was Sarah. One afternoon, she came to the room where we were staying. She stood in the doorway crying and begging. "Mom, how could you tear us apart like this? How can you believe a child over him? Robert is a good man, can't you see that?" Her face was gaunt, her eyes swollen from crying, but her voice was full of anger. I stayed inside, holding Emily tight as she trembled and refused to open the door. "Sarah, you don't understand," I told her, my voice breaking. "I'm doing this for Emily because she needs to be safe." But she just shook her head and screamed, "You ruined everything." Then she left, leaving me with a shattered heart. Meanwhile, Robert continued to teach every day as if nothing had happened. He still wore his spotless white shirt, still smiled at the students and parents. I heard he was even being praised as an example of a man who had endured great injustice, but remained dedicated to his profession. Every time I heard those words, it felt like salt being poured on my wounds. He had won, at least for now. He had managed to turn Emily and me into the town outcasts, while he maintained his perfect facade. But strangely, despite being isolated, despite having to live in a cramped rental room, I felt a strange sense of lightness. Every night when Emily slept soundly beside me without waking up from nightmares, I knew I had done the right thing. At least the girl no longer had to live under the same roof as that demon in disguise. I would hold her, sing her the old lullaby in a low voice, and pray, as I always did, asking God for the strength to keep going. The days in that little room near the church passed slowly, as if time itself was testing my patience. Every morning I'd wake up early, prepare my basket of food, and set up my spot on the corner of the market, where the prying eyes and whispers of the neighbors never stopped. But I didn't care anymore. As long as Emily was safe, I could endure any gossip. The little girl started at a new school, smaller and farther away, but I saw how, little by little, the light returned to her eyes, how her shy smile reappeared when she talked about her new friends. One day, as I was on my corner wrapping up steaming containers of chili for customers, the whispers started to spread. At first it was just fragments of conversation caught in the noise of the market. "Professor Miller. Seems he's not what everyone thinks," a vegetable seller muttered to her friend. "My daughter says he keeps her after class sometimes, and he looks at her in a really weird way." I froze, my hands still on the container, my heart pounding in my chest. Those words were pieces that fit the suspicion that had tormented me for months. But I didn't dare get my hopes up. Robert, with his reputation and his cunning, had built a wall that was too strong. Who would believe those rumors when the whole town had worshipped him like a hero? One afternoon, while I was mopping the floor of our room, I heard a timid knock on the door. When I opened it, I saw a middle-aged woman with a worried expression standing in the doorway. It was Mrs. Lucy, the mother of one of Robert's students. She lowered her voice as if afraid someone would hear her. "Mrs. Carroll, I don't think you made anything up. My daughter, Sophia, told me that Professor Miller makes her stay alone after class. Says it's to help him with grading. But she says he gets too close to her, and it scares her." Mrs. Lucy's voice was trembling, her eyes full of anxiety. A chill ran down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. I took her hand and said, "Lucy, you need proof. Otherwise, he'll just deny everything." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and promised to find a way to protect her daughter. A few weeks later, the entire town was shaken. Another parent, Mr. Paul, had placed a hidden camera in the school hallway after his daughter told him the same thing. The video he got spread like wildfire through parent group chats. I was in my room holding the old smartphone a generous neighbor had lent me, my hands shaking as I opened the file. The image was blurry but unmistakable. Robert, in his usual white shirt, trying to pull a young girl into a corner of the hallway, his hand on her shoulder, whispering something to her. The terrified girl pulled away and ran off. Rage and sorrow for Emily overwhelmed me. My granddaughter had endured all of that alone for so long, while the whole town applauded the man who had hurt her. In just a few days, like a domino effect, several other female students began to find the courage to speak up. One girl said Robert used to call her to his office to ask about homework, but the way he looked at her made her skin crawl. Another, just 11 years old, said that he had once touched her hand and laughed in a strange way. Each testimony was like a hammer blow, shattering the wall of lies Robert had built for so long. The school could no longer turn a blind eye. He was suspended immediately, and the police, this time, opened a new, much more serious investigation. Officer Evans, with his arrogant smirk, was gone, replaced by a team of investigators from the city with sharp questions and an unforgiving tone. That afternoon, I sat in the small rental room and turned on the old TV the landlady had lent me. The local news mentioned Robert's name, with the headline, "Teacher accused of inappropriate conduct with students." Emily, who was beside me, shot her head up at the sound of her stepfather's name, her eyes wide. Then she threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly, sobbing, "Grandma, they believe me now, right?" I held her, tears rolling down my wrinkled cheeks. For the first time in many dark months, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. "Yes, my love," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "I told you the truth always finds a way out." But my joy was clouded by the pain I felt for Sarah. My daughter was completely destroyed. Neighbors told me she had withered away, that she was gaunt, her eyes always swollen from crying. Sarah clung to the belief that her husband was innocent. She went from house to house, pleading through her tears, "Don't hurt Robert. He's a good man. He couldn't have done that." But the wave of truth was too strong now, and no one believed her anymore. Those who had once celebrated her wedding now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. On the day of the trial, all of Clearwater seemed to be holding its breath. The courtroom was packed, a constant murmur rippling through the crowd. Outside, local reporters, parents, and students gathered holding up handwritten signs. "Justice for the victims," and "Make the guilty pay." I was there, in the middle of the crowd, feeling my heart tighten in my chest. All those months of anguish, doubt, and pain had led to this moment, the moment the truth would come out. But I didn't want Emily to witness it. I didn't want her to face Robert again, the man who had planted terror in her childhood. I took her by the hand and led her to the park near the courthouse, where Mary was waiting for us. "Grandma is just going inside for a little while, Emily," I whispered, stroking her hair. "You stay here with your Aunt Mary, play for a bit, okay?" Emily nodded, her big eyes looking at me full of trust. I smiled at her, though my heart was heavy as I walked away. Stepping into the courtroom, the air was suffocating. The old wooden benches were full, and the ceiling fan whirred, trying in vain to cut through the tension. I found a seat near the back, trying to blend in with the crowd. And then I saw him, Robert, standing at the defendant's table, clean-shaven, wearing a spotless white shirt, as if still trying to maintain the facade of a respectable teacher. but his restless, nervous eyes gave him away. He was no longer the man the whole town had once admired. He was just someone desperate to hide his crimes. The trial began. Each witness was called, and each statement was like a hammer blow, shattering the mask of respectability Robert had so carefully constructed. One girl, only 12 years old, stood before the court, her voice trembling as she recounted how Robert would keep her after class, with a look that made her afraid. Another parent presented the video from the hallway camera. The image was blurry but clear enough to make my blood run cold. Robert pulling a student into a corner, his hand on her shoulder, murmuring words no one wanted to hear. Then came the disgusting text messages found on his phone, not the one I had found under Emily's bed, but another one, seized by the police during the investigation. Those messages, sent to several female students, were filled with sick words that sent a shudder through the entire courtroom. I sat there, my fists clenched, feeling both rage and pain. Emily, my granddaughter, had endured all of this alone, while I had been blind, believing Robert was a good man. I turned to look at the back row, where Sarah was sitting on the floor, her face in her hands, crying silently. My daughter had wasted away. She was gaunt, her eyes sunken as if all the life had been drained from her. She wasn't defending Robert anymore, not screaming like she had before, but her eyes still held an immense pain, as if she couldn't accept the truth. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her that her mother still loved her, but I knew it wasn't the time. Sarah needed time to face her own collapse, to accept that her blindness had led her to turn her back on her daughter and her own mother. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern gaze, listened to every testimony. When the prosecutor finished her closing statement, the room was suspended in silence. The final sentence was delivered, several years in prison for the crimes Robert had committed. He bowed his head, not saying a word, as the bailiffs led him away. His honor, his career, everything he once had, turned to dust in a matter of hours. Outside, the crowd in front of the courthouse erupted in applause, but I felt no joy. Only relief, as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from my chest. As I walked out of the courthouse, I looked up at the blue sky and took a deep breath. The air had never felt so clean, as if the whole world had been washed clean after the storm. Across the street, in the park, Emily saw me from a distance. The little girl ran towards me, her small feet skipping along the dirt path, and she hugged me tightly, whispering, "Grandma, I'm going to sleep peacefully from now on. I won't see that man in my room anymore." Her voice was clear, full of hope, and for the first time in so many months, I saw a radiant smile on her face. I burst into tears, holding Emily close, as the tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks. "That's right, my love," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "From now on, there will only be happy dreams." We stood there in the middle of the small park, under the shade of an almond tree swaying in the wind. I felt a peace I thought I had lost forever, but that joy wasn't complete, because I knew that Sarah, my daughter, was paying the price for her blindness. I didn't go looking for her. I heard from the neighbors that she had left town without telling anyone, just quietly packed her things and disappeared. A part of me ached for her, wanted to run after her, to hug her and tell her that her mother was still here, waiting for her. But I knew Sarah needed time to heal, to face the truth that the man she loved had betrayed everyone. Emily and I went back to the small rental room, which had now become our home. Every night, I would sit beside her and tell her stories from my youth, of the days when her mother and I would run through the orange grove. Emily started to laugh more, to sing the nursery rhymes I had taught her again. I still went to my corner at the market every morning to sell chili, but now the distrustful looks were fewer. Some neighbors, the same ones who had turned their backs on me before, started to stop by to apologize for not believing me. Mrs. Lucy, Sophia's mom, even brought me a basket of fresh oranges and said, "Mrs. Carroll, my daughter is safe because of you." Thank you. I don't blame them. I know that in a small town like Clearwater, the truth sometimes needs time to break through the lies. My only ache is for Sarah. After everything that happened, she became the target of criticism from both the town and social media for being so blinded by love that she couldn't see her own daughter's suffering. And to this day, that remains a thorn in my heart. But when I look at Emily, when I watch her grow every day, with a smile that gets brighter and brighter, I understand that my greatest happiness now is being by her side, watching her grow up in safety and love under a sky with no shadows. I've lived long enough to understand something. Demons disguised as people, no matter how well they hide, will sooner or later pay for their crimes. They can fool an entire town, buy off the powerful, even make a family turn its back on a child. But the truth never disappears. My granddaughter had to endure a horror that few would dare to believe. And the most valuable lesson I learned after all of this is this: never underestimate a child's fear. Their silent tears can be a desperate cry for help. And it's our responsibility to listen to them, to protect them until the very end. I want everyone to understand that justice may be slow, but it always arrives, and anyone who brings pain to a child will sooner or later have to face the consequences. So don't turn your back, don't stay silent, and never dismiss a child's pain, because that silence can destroy an entire childhood. The story you've just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone listening will stop and think, how many mothers might be suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you have the courage to face it all to get your voice back? I want to know what you think, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I'm sure that bravery will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I'll leave 2 of the channel's most loved stories. I know they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.